Here we go. A quick reminder of a story we shared when we started this cycle of Tanya about the question was asked, what did the Alter Rebbe achieve with writing Tanya? What was the objective? What is the goal of writing Tanya? So he describes it as a conversation that a person said, look, what is the difference between the Jew and just a good person? So we explained that a Jew, has a godly soul, and therefore he wants godly things. So then he asked, well, how come sometimes I want ungodly things? He said, well, you also have a human character trait. Again, the term is animal soul, but we could use the term human soul. He says, well, what do I do about it? He says, read my book. That's what it's about. The book is about what do I do about this conflict between my godly impulse, which is not just to do good things, but to do godly things and to do things in a godly manner, and my human impulse, which is for self-serving things. A simple summary: the human asks, "Is this good for me?" And the godly asks, "Is this good?" Whether or not it's good for me personally at any level. And we do make the argument that ultimately the two are intertwined. That is, that which is good for the world and good for God will ultimately also be good for me at a personal level, but that should not be our driving force. Now, for the first 8 chapters, we talked about, I like the analogy of the chess set. We talked about what are the different players that you have and what are their capacities. So we understand that we have two mutually exclusive driving forces between us, the godly and the self serving. And they cannot coexist. Now, they can sort of get along, but at the ultimate level, there's going to be the separation between what do I want, or better, why do I want it? I mean, they may both want the same thing, but why do they want it? And we talked about in the last chapter where they each find their most powerful home field, the godly soul in the transcendent capacity of intellect. And again, intellect doesn't mean how many pages of Torah I know by heart or even my IQ. Rather, it's my willingness to go outside of myself. And the human soul finds itself most comfortable in the reactive heart.
Yikes. What the heck?
I see it, I want it. Uh, I don't know. I see it, I want it, and I just respond to it. The response to stimulus, the almost involuntary response to stimulus, and the two again don't just say, "Well, I'll leave you in the heart and you in the mind," because they each want what the other also has. That is, the animal soul wants the intellect of the brain, so that we don't just have to eat grass. We can come up with creative things for pleasures. And the godly soul wants the heart because there's also the mitzvahs of the emotional side: love of God, love of other people, love of Torah, reverence for God, reverence for people, et cetera, et cetera. So the battle is on. And ultimately, remember what Hashem told Rivka Imenu: there are two forces within you. When one rises, the other falls. And what we're ultimately going to get to, not in this chapter, but in chapter 12, really, is that's life. Life is about the endless battle to do the right thing, not about winning the battle. Although we all can hopefully have those certain areas where we win the battle. That is, not only do we overcome the temptation, but we completely eradicate it and even redirect that energy to become an ally for the godly. Uh, I mean, the most simple of examples, imagine you tell a child, you can't play with this toy. Oh, that sounds like torment. Then they overcome it. Then at some point, they have no interest in it. That is, they resist it, they forget about it, and then they redirect that energy. Now, in chapters 10, 11, and 12, today we're starting chapter 10, we're going to start to talk about how this becomes implemented in our three, again, very loose, but we'll get a little bit more particular definitions of characters. That is the tzaddik, the rasha, and then what is really the emphasis of Tanya which will be in chapter 12, is the Beinoni. So up until now, as you recall, when I say up until now, I mean until Tanya came along, in the Talmud, where these terms originate and are categorized, as the Alter Rebbe mentioned way back in the very beginning, the tzaddik was often seen as a really nice guy, like, oh, that guy's a tzaddik, and we use that term colloquially. Or it means the guy who's got one more in the win column than in the loss column. So at the end of days, he's awarded instead of punished. And the Russia was like this horrible, wicked, terrible, Haman HaRussia. And then the Beinoni was like an average guy, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, 50% here, 50% there. And those were basically the working definitions of these terms. Now, Tanya is more than a deep dive into particularizing these three terms, meaning we're not against that. We have much academic in Torah where we talk about a very particular concept and we do a very detailed analysis until we have a whole new understanding of some specific term. And again, I'm not, God forbid, at any level diminishing the significance of that, but that's not what Tanya is. But Tanya uses that is the framework of these three phrases, tzaddik, Russia, and Beinoni, to help us understand not where do I get slotted, not which one am I, but to understand the dynamic of our ongoing interactive relationship with Hashem. Now, as we're going to define it here, because we start with tzaddik, we start sort of at the highest level. Then in chapter 11, we're going to go to the total contrast of the Rasha. And in chapter 12, we really hit on the Alter Rebbe's primary objective, which is the Beinoni, as we'll get there. Now, in short, the tzaddik is not just somebody who only does good things, and not only the person who only likes good things. It's the person who has because we're going to talk about nuances and shades within them, because again, we are human beings, we are dynamic entities, we're not algorithms, although there's temptation to sort of slot ourselves. I'm good, they're bad, I do this, they don't do that, and so on and so forth. The tzaddik is the person who has at least completely silenced his selfish impulse. And at the higher, more profound level, more accomplished level, he has actually redirected that energy to the service of Hashem. He has literally beat his swords into plowshares. He has taken the antagonistic energy of the animal soul, which is more powerful than the godly soul, like the raging bull, and he's redirected it to become an ally in the service of Hashem. The Rasha, on the other hand, is a person who at any moment surrenders to the temptations of the animal soul. So what's the Beinoni? Well, just to make sure you can sleep at night, the Beinoni acts like the tzaddik. That is, he wins every battle. So every conscious thought, spoken word, and deed is in alignment with Hashem. And he struggles internally like the Rasha. He still has the temptation, the distraction, and the magnetic pull towards the self-serving. So the tzaddik has transformed his animal soul, the Rasha indulges his animal soul, and the Beinoni contains his animal soul. But it's still there, it's still raging, it's still pounding on the door. Okay, so based on this framework, we're going into, again, chapter 10. Vihine. Now, as we always point out when we begin a new chapter, when it begins with the letter Vav, which we translate as and, so in English it's poor form to begin a sentence with the word and, but in Torah you'll find a highly disproportionate number of verses that begin with the letter Vav. It means that we are continuing what we had done in the previous chapter. In the previous chapter, we spoke about the battle between the godly soul and the animal soul, head, heart, head. And now we're going to talk about what that looks like when it plays out. Kisha ha'adam. Now, the word adam, which of course we translate as human being, but we drill down here a little bit more specifically, and this is going to become a common theme. So let's take a few minutes now to really talk about what the distinctive title of the word Adam is. Now, in English, we have certain variations of this. For example, if we describe somebody as a male, that's a biological definition. If we describe someone as a boy, that's a sort of age level. If we call someone a gentleman, that's a certain character level. We say he's a real manly man. Again, it's a character. So in Torah, we have basically four terms that all seem to translate as person or human being and so on. And yet, as we know, that Torah has no true synonyms. Every word is a particular nuance. And even though they seem to mean the same thing, like the word male and gentleman, but they carry a certain connotation that is distinctive. So the four Hebrew words are Ish, Enosh, Gever, and Adam. And we find them interspersed throughout Torah. Well, what do they specifically reference? So the word Adam, which is what we're going to be focused on, if you just look at the three letters, Aleph, Daled, Mem, so the root word there is the letters, the last two, the second and third letters, Dam, Daled, Mem, which translate as the word for blood. But in our context, we'll think about it as basic biological function. So it's not the circulatory system and not the respiratory system. It means biological function. Dam is biological function. As you are familiar, in Torah, it is prohibited to eat blood. And when it says, why you're not allowed to eat blood, as we've quoted here, because ki hadam hu nefesh. Because an animal, its only identity is its blood, its biological function. So an animal is driven exclusively by its biological imperative. Why does it eat? Because it's hungry. Why does it breathe? Involuntary. Why does it reproduce? Involuntary. It is simply driven by, that's what it does. Now, a human being can act that way as well. And our goal is to Aleph Dam, Adam. The Aleph, which precedes these two letters, which represent, again, biological function. Aleph, the first letter of the Aleph base, represents the oneness of Hashem. So our goal is that the Aleph should drive the Dam. We're not looking to eliminate the Dam, the blood, the biological sense. We are looking to master it. And we master it with the Aleph over the Dam. Now, of course, Adam is named Adam because, or teaches us, that it is the Spirit of God that is blown into his nostrils. The distinctive characteristic of the human being is our capacity for thought. Now, again, whenever we're going to use this, we say intelligence and so on. It's not a battle of IQs. And again, we only have to look around to our society for people with very high IQs who are just completely self-absorbed. So it's not about how smart I am. It's the gift of intelligence is the ability to get outside of myself. Like there's a saying I think it's in the Talmud, that an animal never sees the sky. An animal walks on all fours. It only sees the ground. It doesn't have this capacity to see the infinite sky above. And that is a metaphor for when I'm staring at some sort of delicious temptation, the human capacity to look beyond it and to see something greater than it is the gift of intelligence. So I like the word imagination, maybe the word creativity, whatever it is, but don't confuse it with data retention or even innovation and so on. It's about the capacity to get beyond because, again, intelligence can build ego no different than physical accomplishments. So when the Alter Rebbe says, Kishaha Adam, that the Adam, he's calling our attention that the mechanism to reaching this goal is through the engagement of, again, intellect, imagination, creativity, overriding my simple, well, I don't know, that's what I did because that's what I want to do. And again, in our general society, that characteristic, I do what I want, when I want, nobody tells me not nothing what to do, is often seen as a virtue. But in Torah, it's seen as simply being the product of impulse and so on. So when this other magbir nafshoy, now the word magbir comes from the root word is the word gibor, mighty, gevura, strength. Shimshin is called the gibor, the mighty one. So where do we find the strength of the godly soul, we read in the last chapter that it's in the intellect, it's in that ability to overcome and not just to act out of reflex. I couldn't help myself. It was so delicious, I had to eat it. I couldn't help myself. I was so angry, I had to say it. And we counter with that and say, no, the intellect can rise above whatever that impulse is. So when a person faces a challenge that is an impulse, where can they go? They go to the intellect to lift themselves above it. Who is wise? He who sees the outcome of his behavior. So where is he going to get the strength to overcome the temptation that seems irresistible? It's through engaging the creativity, imagination, intellect. Okay? So he's magber nafshay halakis. He strengthens the godly soul. And again, the godly soul is most at home in the intellect. So he strengthens that. That's what's going to get him beyond. I couldn't help myself. I had to say that. I had to do that. I had to eat that. I had to engage in that behavior. The nilcham, and he battles. Now, we have a parsha, kitzetze l'mochama al oivecha. It reads, when you go out to war above your enemies. And amongst the many explanations in Chassidus is that the key to victory is to remain above the enemy, higher than the enemy. And what is it that the godly soul has? What is its advantage? Its advantage is the irrepressible capacity of the intellect. Just like I can never persuade the calculator that 2 plus 3 is anything other than 5, no matter how tempting it would be, so too the intellect. As a simple exercise, if I am faced with a dilemma, I might ask myself, what would I tell a friend who had this same dilemma? Meaning, when I really want to do that, so I come up with all kinds of excuses and I can justify to myself why it's a healthy thing to do and it's not so bad and everybody does it and I'll fix it tomorrow, et cetera, et cetera. But we know that that's false. How do we know it's false? Because if my friend said to me, what do you think that I do X, Y, and Z, and then I'll fix it that way, you'd say, come on, it's never going to work. Why? Because then I'm being intellectual and I can override their impulse. But when it's my impulse, well, my impulse is trying to get to my brain and not stay there too long so it doesn't get dissuaded from engagement. So we have to nilcham, we have to battle with it. Now, the battle is primarily defensive. I have to fend off that temptation. Kol kach, so much so, ima Bahamas, with that animalistic impulse, with that just do it because of indulgence, until shemegarish. Now, the word megarish means to banish, to chase it away. So, again, a simplistic illustration. A person is going about their day and some temptation comes. They get angry, they get indulgent, they get lazy, whatever it may be. So what's the first stage? We got to engage the intellect. And again, not because I can quote to you 6 pages. I got to remember that life is not just what's staring me in the face. How am I going to feel after I do it? What is a classic illustration of this? When I finish doing it, am I proud that I did it or am I ashamed that I did it? So that's the first stage. And then I have to battle because the animal soul is not going away so easily. And it comes back with a counter argument because remember, from the heart, it goes to the intellect, though not in the intellect, to try to come up with some creative pushback and so on. So then I have to go into battle mode and I have to be determined. And this is a point that the Alter Rebbe will make numerous times, that just like in a physical confrontation, victory goes not just to the strongest or the swiftest, but to the most determined. And it requires determination. It requires us to really be dug in. And as we have talked about so many times, one of the core themes of Tanya is no excuses. I really wish so do it. So be determined. And it requires that determination. So again, not us, of course, because we're perfect, but people that we know will often fall into this trap that, I couldn't help myself, or everybody does it. And then I say, well, that guy didn't do it. This guy. And then we have to come to the realization that, well, maybe we're just being a little lazy. And then, unfortunately, in society, we say, well, that's good. Laziness is good, and so on. So we go first to denying it, to justifying it. So we have to be so dogged till we not only don't do it, but we have to megarish, we have to banish it, we have to chase it out because it's coming back. It's coming back again and again. And again, unfortunately, we probably all can relate to this. Whatever the it is, it's not going away just because I was able to keep it away once and twice and 5 times. It can constantly come back. And then we want to ultimately, our ultimate goal is to destroy it. Now, this word meva'er is a word that we come across in Torah. And there are 2 particular circumstances in Torah where we are required to fulfill the obligation called or a form of this word. Yeah, Liana, you have to unmute so we can hear you.
Sorry, could you go back like a paragraph? You were saying the main message of Tanya is, and you used a couple words that were really helpful and I missed them.
Struggle is not failure.
Okay.
Um,
It was more like no excuses.
no excuses is another one.
So
But struggling is not, I mean, just because a person might think, well, look, for 20 years I resisted and it's still a battle. If you can't beat them, join them. Well, no. It may always be, I may always have this issue, but it need not manifest. So I may always be a late sleeper and I set my alarm and I get up every single day, and every single day it's a challenge.
okay.
So, right, I may always be a late sleeper, but I don't have to sleep late.
Thank you.
Okay. So there are 2 examples. Kameshikosov, like it says.
Rabbi Epstein? Oh,
yes.
sorry.
Sure.
So are you allowed to write in like
No.
what? In the book, like when you're reading the word, huh?
We encourage it. It's encouraged.
So it's okay
In 1,000
I just
years,
didn't know.
they'll find it in the museum. It's like, who was this great scholar with the
Okay,
commentary?
because I'm finally starting to get some of like what you're saying about the words. So I was
Good. Okay.
okay,
Write them
all
down.
right, thank you.
Yeah, some of it only really works in the original Hebrew, so it's a little hard.
I
But I
know,
hope
that's
that you
why
capture some of the nuance. Yeah, I
no,
got you.
because when I'm taking notes, I can't write it in Hebrew in my notebook. So I'm like, I need to write it in the book. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So there's 2 times that it is mentioned, this idea of beer, of mevar harash b'chol hasmoy, to destroy. That's the word I'm going to use, but I'm really going to change it in a moment. But that's the common phrase, and that is, like it says, you should destroy this evil from within you. Now that phrase is used twice in Torah. Once it's used referring to a false prophet. That is a person who comes forward and somehow manages to persuade us that he is a prophet from Hashem, which of course we have prophets. And then he uses it to distract us from the service of Hashem, to violate. So he has to be destroyed. Another is the Ben Sora Umora, which is this hypothetical case of a child whose rebellious behavior is so extreme that he has to be executed. I mean, and it's so whacked out that the Talmud says that it's really just an example. It's not something that ever actually happened because it's just so far-fetched. But the idea being that there is the capacity to destroy or uproot, or we're going to ultimately get to a greater level called transform, even that worst of character traits. Now, unfortunately, I think we as a society have developed somewhat of a cynicism that every guy in jail suddenly, yes, now I see the error of my ways. Now I'm a changed person. Can I have my parole? Snicker, snicker. He gets out. 5 minutes later, he's right back to where he was. Now, that's overly cynical. There also is the idea that, sure, while he's in prison, he doesn't have the exposure to the temptations and sensations that brought him to his misbehavior. As such, he behaves himself and he believes himself to be genuinely changed. And then they put him right back out at the buffet line, and there goes his diet. And there is such a thing as a person can, in fact, transform themselves and do tshuva. And we have many stories of this in the Talmud, and maybe people even know individuals that way, Or in the more micro level, if you think about something in your own life that you thought there's no way I could ever give this up. This is something that I'm always going to do, whether it's a behavior or it's a character trait. And then the person resists it and ultimately transforms it. I've told this story before, but maybe it illustrates the point. Is a person I know, many of you know him as well. Obviously, I won't say who he is. And he's making his progress. And the one thing that was his thing is he loved to go to restaurants. He loved to go out to eat to non-kosher restaurants. He would leave Yom Kippur here and go down the street to a treif restaurant. That was where he was. That's where he was holding. That's where he was. And finally, he sort of came around. He said, this is not me. So he made a list of his 10 favorite restaurants and decided he's going to go to each one more time, have one more meal, and then no more. And he made a calendar and a schedule. So it came the day to go to the first one that he had been going to for all these years. And he walks up and he goes to open the door and he says, what am I doing? And he didn't walk in. And he says, that's it. I don't want this anymore. Now, once upon a time, that would have been unthinkable. Then it became a struggle. Now it's like I used to do that. I used to eat that. I used to go there. I used to behave that way. It's like he can't even imagine it. It's so completely foreign to his life. So this is what we're talking about here. Uvi'arta hara means not only that I completely cut it out of my life like the false prophet or the rebellious child, but I even get to the point where I can't imagine that I ever wanted to do that. It seems so foreign to my life. I see a picture and I go, that was me? I did that? It seems so foreign. Now, King David tells us, my sin I always keep before me, because just because I haven't done it for 30 years doesn't mean that I've completely, and I can let my guard down, and potentially I could slip back. So be cautious about that. Just don't be very careful about that. But there is such an aspiration. Now, the Tanya continues, Ve'ein hara nahapech l'tov mamish. So if he has not redirected it, that this energy is now an ally, he's, quote, only, and again, it sounds like a pretty harsh term, but he's only been able to eliminate it, so it holds no sway over him. He is called Nikra Tzadik She'eino Gomer V'Tzadik V'Raloi. He is called, this term that we introduced way back in the first chapter, which is a term that comes from the Talmud. He is called a tzaddik who is not complete, and a tzaddik that is ra to him, that bad is to him. Now, until now, that is in the Talmud, until the Alter Rebbe came along, the common understanding of this phrase, the tzaddik v'raloi, the tzaddik and bad is to him, was more about experience, that he's a tzaddik and bad things happen to him. He suffered the suffering tzaddik. As Pirkei Avos says, we cannot understand the tranquility of the wicked and the suffering of the righteous. Now, there was an indication that why is the bad happening? Because he's an incomplete tzaddik. That's why he got a paper cut. That's why he didn't get a good parking spot or whatever other suffering it was. Or we would say at a little bit of a loftier level that he sees it as bad because he's incomplete. If he was a complete tzaddik, he would know that everything comes from Hashem, and therefore he would see it as good. But it was essentially a consequential indication of his status, that this is who he is because of what occurs to him. But now the Alter Rebbe has given us a different interpretation, that this is a tzaddik, but he still has that ra. Now again, the ra translated as evil or bad, but in our context, we're going to describe it as self-servingness, not evil as in murder or something horrible, but self-servingness. But it's loy, it's his, meaning he has totally dominated it. He is incomplete. He has not completely redirected it to be an ally. He's got it, as we would say, under control. It's under his control. He completely controls it. It's completely subdued, but it is still an enemy. Like a person in prison, the Alter Rebbe will describe later, that the person is still the same person. He's just not free to exorcise his misbehaviors, not because he doesn't want to, and not because he has in any way changed his ways. He's simply imprisoned. So if I could take a pill to imprison my impulse, that I won't lose my temper and I won't be lazy or stingy or impatient or greedy, I would do it. Sure, sign me up for it. Where can I get that to resist the expression? Now, again, the ultimate objective level would be, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could transform it? So now we take the guy in jail, and not just that he's trying to fool the parole board, or because he's not faced with the stimulus around him, because there isn't that opportunity, but he has literally transformed himself, and now has become the advocate. And again, it does happen. And now he's on the speaker circuit going around and telling people about the evil of his ways. Now he's become the greatest advocate and ally for godliness. That's the highest of high levels. That is truly the highest of high levels. So here we go. Dahainu, this means sheyesh boyadayin ma'at mizeira b'chol asmali. That means that there is still this tiny bit of ra. Now again, the word ra is translated as evil. And again, at least me, in my world, when I think of the word evil, I'm thinking of mamish, horrible, evil treachery. But not in Tanya world. In Tanya world, we're not talking about that. We got libraries and libraries to tell you what to eat and what not to eat and what to do and so on. We're talking about, again, I'm going to use the word self-servingness. There's still that self-servingness that is buried deeply within the person. It's tiny, but it's still there, and it can come back at any time, and that's the cautious thing. So there's still a little bit of looking over my shoulder instead of what can I do to be in the service of Hashem. And again, basically the Alter Rebbe's point is we've got to let go of this, am I good? Am I going to heaven? And this sort of binary understanding of life, and rather understand that we are complex and there's a spectrum that we land on about our self-awareness versus our godly awareness, our service of self in contrast to our service of Hashem. And round they go. And therefore, therefore it appears to the person that he has in fact completely banished it and that it's entirely gone. It appears that way. Well, then how do you know it isn't that way? Now, again, if we think about it, who is completely healthy? The rarest of rare people. I mean, you wear glasses, but it doesn't mean you're not functional. So I don't have 20/20 vision. I wear glasses. I have 20/20 vision. So in practice, I am functional. My vision is 20/20 based on this assistance. Now, this doesn't transform my flaw. It just addresses it, and that's fine. It gets me through the day. Like we say, it's a very common thing, with the computer. Don't try to fix it, just try to work around it. This program isn't working. There's 17 other programs that'll work just as fine. Just work around it, or restart it, and so on. Don't try to fix it. Just restart it. So a similar concept here. Now, how do we know that it's only apparently been chased away and it isn't taka chased away? What's the evidence that it's not taka chased away? But in truth, well, when we say truth, we don't mean as opposed to a lie. We mean as it is if we dug all the way down into its essence. If it would have been completely swapped out and chased away, now this really becomes a key point to this understanding this chapter. Energy cannot be destroyed. Things can't be destroyed. You can't turn a thing into a no thing. You can only turn it into something else. That is, even if you take wood and you burn it, you can't destroy the wood. You just turn it into something else. You turn it into vapor, you turn it into energy, into power, whatever it is. You cannot chase it away. You can only reconfigure it into something else. That's all you can do, is reconfigure it into something else. Now, the same is true, meaning just like only Hashem can create something out of no thing, so too only Hashem can turn something into no thing. But we can't. Just like we can only take one thing and reconfigure it into something else, similarly, we can't take something and turn it into nothing. We can't. So, what can we do? We can resist it, we can reject it, but ultimately, what we are hopeful to do is to transform it into something else, to turn an enemy into a friend. And this is the unique capacity of the godly soul, to turn an enemy into a friend. And had we done that, had we destroyed, I mean, it's sort of backwards way of saying it, you can't destroy the Nefesh HaBahamis. You can quiet it, or you can turn it into an ally. That's it. It can't go to zero. It could be quieted, or it can be redirected into the service of Hashem. Well, Bi'er Inyan, we explain, Kihine Tzadik Gomor. Now we go to the next level. That is the Tzadik Gomor, the complete Tzadik. So now we understand, what do we mean he's complete? So in the Talmud, before Tanya, we thought, what does that mean he's a complete Tzaddik? It means he's the best Tzaddik. He's a better tzaddik. He's a greater tzaddik. He's a big tzaddik. You know, it's like this guy, he's a big doctor. What's the difference between a doctor and a big doctor? The tzaddik and the big tzaddik? So now we understand it's gomor, the word gomor meaning complete. What has he completed? What is it that he has executed? What is the task he has completed? He has transformed his animal soul completely to be in alliance with his godly soul. Now, again, there are also gradations. I mean, you think about this, use a sort of maybe a loose analogy in international relations. There are countries that are at war with each other. There are countries that sort of leave each other alone. There are countries that have trade agreements and interactions. And then there can even be a time when the country absorbs itself into the greater country. What's the resistance to that last level? Because I don't want to give up my identity. I don't want to become part of something, even if I acknowledge that that country is a superior country and it's more beneficial. I don't want to give up. So what is it that resists the person? I don't want to give up myself. This is the hardest part of our relationship with Hashem. My resistance to wanting to give up my identity, to give up who I am. That's the hard part. I don't want to give up my identity. So the Alter Rebbe explains that what in fact is this Tzaddik Gomor, what has he achieved? That he has transformed his Ra l'Tov, and therefore he's called Nikra Tzaddik V'Tovlei. That's why he's called the Tzaddik V'Tovlei, the Tzaddik that good is to him. Now, again, historically, that is prior to Tanya, we thought, what does it mean at Tzaddik V'Tovlei? What does that mean? It means that he's a tzaddik and good things happen. He not only has good in the spiritual, he has good in the material. And again, whether that's because Hashem is blessing him with all kinds of bonuses, or it's because he has the attitude that everything is from Hashem and therefore everything is good, and all of that kind of, I call it rabbi talk, where we explain that you're not really suffering, you just think you're suffering, and blow on, and guys, well, my foot hurts. No, it doesn't really hurt, and so, and then, you get a lecture. That's not what it means here. What it means is the only thing that is active in his life is Tov. The only thing that is active in his life is Tov. Everything else in his life, or everything in his life, is aligned and directed to godliness. His humanity is directed to godliness. His passions are directed to godliness. So there's no struggle whatsoever. There's no struggle within himself. And ultimately, just in a broader sense, this is truly what we mean when we talk about heaven, Gan Eden, Mashiach's times. It means no friction. That's what it ultimately means. Clarity of my identity, clarity of my purpose, clarity of who I am. That's what we mean when we talk about the idea of Gan Eden and Mashiach and so on. It means absolute alignment with self, absolute alignment with Hashem, absolute alignment of purpose. I am who I am, what I need to be, and in total and perfect alignment. So that's what it means. He's tzaddik and toiv loy. The toiv is the only thing that is part of his life. Not that he has restrained his animal soul, but he has completely transformed it, and it's an absolute alliance with him. Hu al yedei asaris habagodim hatzayim legamri mihara. So how do you achieve that? Okay, where do I sign up? What do I do to get that? And the answer is that he has completely removed the filthy garments. Now, remember this term of the garments. Of the garments, which is my capacity for conscious thought. Again, not just what happens to pop into my head, but what I willfully sit and think about, my spoken word, what I actually think about, what I actually say, and so on, and my behavior. So the godly soul and the self-serving soul are both in battle to control them. They want to control my thought. That is, the animal soul wants to think, what can I get out of every situation? Doesn't mean in an evil, sinister way, but what can I gain from every situation? What can I say that will be to my benefit? People will like me. They'll think I'm nice. It'll be witty. And what can I do that will? And the godly soul is similarly, simultaneously fighting over the same exact three skills. How can I think about God? What can I say that is godly? What can I do that is godly? So the completely righteous person, and we say complete, that is, he's totally transformed his animating human soul to be exclusively in pursuit of his identity or of his service of Hashem, has removed those garments that are dirty. Dirty meaning aligned with self-servingness. It's completely been reduced. So again, I mean, hopefully everybody has encountered somebody like this. Unfortunately, it's often easier to describe it in the negative, but in the positive, there are people, whenever they come across an idea, all they can think about is, how can I make this into a more godly situation? There's this great opportunity. How can we use this in the service of Hashem? Again, it's often much easier and certainly more emotionally charged to think about the opposite, that they walk around constantly on the lookout. It's like a very successful salesman. This is a little bit on the more squirrely side. All they can think about is, everybody I meet, how can I sell them a garage door? How can I sell them whatever it is I do? And that's their entire modus operandi. They're constantly looking to make a sale and so on. Now, again, they exist in the along the spectrum in between the two. So what has the completely righteous tzaddik done? He has removed that pursuit of personal self-gratification, and he has replaced it exclusively with the pursuit of the service of Hashem. Okay, how do we do that? Now, again, just in parentheses now, this is an aspiration more than it is an actual expectation. We'll shoot for it, we'll touch it from time to time, but again, the tzaddik is like a gifted musician or athlete. Yes, they have to practice. Yes, they have to work hard, but they do have a certain skill that is just a gift. That it doesn't discount their effort, but it doesn't mean if I play the piano 10 hours a day that I'll become a great composer. It's a certain gift quality, but all of us can shoot for it. Now, how are we going to do this? Now, historically, there have been basically two strategies. Well, really one, and the Alter Rebbe comes along with the revolutionary one. And it's based on, or it's encapsulated better, in a pasuk in Tehillim that says, you may recognize it, we say it in the davening, Sor meira va'aseh toiv ba'kesh Hashem v'radfehu, which translates loosely as, avoid evil, pursue good, and seek God and chase after him. So what's the best way to do this? How do I get rid of my begadim hatzoyim, these dirty garments, that is this pursuit of self? So one strategy that is basically the common strategy until Tanya came along was to follow the instructions of this verse, avoid evil. Talk about how terrible, how bad doing that is. That's bad. That's bad. Bad, 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 bad. Are you Jewish? Don't eat treif. It's true. It's not wrong. Don't do that, and so on. And then we'll work on doing mitzvahs. Well, the Alter Rebbe kind of flips it, and here he describes, what do we do? Dahainu, that means limois ma'oi betanugi elam haza, lisanig bom betanugas b'nei adam lamalas taivas haguf bolvad, v'loy levaydus Hashem. That is, we want to work on finding repulsive those indulgences of the physical world. How do we do that? Well, one way is, as we'll see, I'm sorry, before we get there, and we want to thus replace it with a passion for godly characteristics. How do we do this? And that's where the answer is. Because all pursuit of the self-serving drives from opposition to godliness. Sitra achra, the other side, that which is pursuing anything other than Hashem. That's what is driving it. So, again, to use an analogy, imagine you've discovered that your child is allergic to peanuts. Now, you like peanuts and you like peanut butter, but you won't have it in your house. Why? Don't you like peanuts? Don't you like peanut butter? I do. But my child is allergic to it, so therefore I keep it away. So I like, as the Talmud says, there are two strategies. One is to say, ew, sin, gross. The other is to say, delicious, but Hashem doesn't like it, so I'm not going to do it. So I can't imagine I ever eating bacon. Disgusting, ew. Or say, I would eat bacon, but God doesn't like it. So I eat chametz on Pesach. God doesn't like it. On a regular day, he likes it. So it's fine. I eat. God likes it. On Yom Kippur, he doesn't like it. It's not that I dislike or like eating or chametz and so on. God doesn't. Like my child. I found out my child's allergic to peanuts. I don't want peanuts. So how do we develop this type of absolute disdain for indulgences of the physical? And here the Alter Rebbe says, Machmis goydol avos laHashem. Because of his tremendous love of Hashem. Meaning, I love my child so much that anything that gets in the way of my child, I don't like it. I'm disgusted by it. So I've used this analogy before. Imagine you're going to your child's wedding and somebody says, hey, would you rather play Scrabble? I don't want to play Scrabble. Why, don't you like Scrabble? Yesterday you played Scrabble. Because playing Scrabble is going to get in the way of achieving the goal. So why is the person, the tzaddik, disgusted by indulgences of the material? Because he loves Hashem so much. He loves Hashem so much that he is disgusted by anything that gets in the way. Not because he doesn't like that thing. So here's the Alter Rebbe's strategy. Every generation has looked for how can we talk people out of the Taivas Olam Haza. Because look, let's face it, like the old joke, you take away the guy's millions, his helicopter, his private jet, his home, his cars, what has he got left? He's got a lot of good stuff. So to say, oh, every guy they're all miserable, everybody's miserable. They're not miserable. They're perfectly happy people. It looks like a lot of fun. So we can try to deride, and everybody who isn't keeping Shabbos is really secretly miserable and so on. They're not. They're perfectly happy people. So what is the incentive to reject that? It's because I love Hashem so much that anything that gets in the way of my love of Hashem, I don't want it. Like the peanuts or like the chametz on Pesach. What don't you like about chametz? I had chametz this morning. But comes Pesach, I'm not going to have chametz. Why? Because I don't like chametz? Because chametz is evil? No, because it gets in the way of my service of Hashem. I want my guest to come over, and my guest is allergic. And if I love my guest, I don't serve what they're allergic to. So Hashem has told us, I'm allergic to these types of things. Even if they're not innately averas, they're only taivas. But again, if you've ever had somebody do you a favor because they want to get something out of it, hi, I have to call 10 people and ask how they're doing so I win a prize, so can I ask you how you're doing? They're not genuinely interested in you. They're interested in themselves. Now, it's not innately bad. The cab driver is interested in himself, but I need his service. He wants the money. I pay him to drive me to the airport. It's a mutual benefit. Everybody's happy. Nothing bad has happened. Everything is worked out. Peachy keen. It's all fine and dandy. But when it comes to my relationships, if I am driven by some form of what's in it for me, that innately taints the the impact it has on the relationship scale. So here the Alter Rebbe really introduces, again, this will seem very familiar to us, but this is the origin. Even though the verse says, avoid evil and then do good, so in theory, we should stand on street corners and say, excuse me, are you Jewish? Don't go to McDonald's, don't do Averas, and then say light Shabbos candles. That's what the Pasuk says. Avoid evil, then do good. And this was the counter argument that people made against the Rebbe's message of what we call simply mivtzoyim, standing on the street corner and offering people to light Shabbos candles and shake the lulav and put on tefillin. They said, no, you should stand there and stop them from doing Averas. And then, how are you going to square this with the pasuk that says avoid evil and then do good? So we say, how are you going to avoid evil? By doing good. That is, strategically, we believe that if the person puts on tefillin or shakes the lulav, they're one tick less likely to go to McDonald's. Doesn't mean it happens immediately and so on. We're going to overwhelm them with godliness to the point that it's one step less. It's one step less, like my friend with the restaurants and so on. It's to the point that he doesn't even want this anymore. He completely outgrows it, and it's even a little disgusting and embarrassing to him. So this is the Alter Rebbe's strategy. So what is it about the tzaddik? Because he knows how terrible it is. He knows how horrible it is. I mean, there is some truth to that. How did we get the world to stop smoking? We showed them x-rays of blackened lungs, and people said, oh, I don't want that. Okay. I mean, it's a strategy. I mean, probably every parent has lost their temper and say, if you don't behave, I'm locking you in your room till you're married. Don't come out of your room until you're 35. Okay. It works at some level, but we don't believe it to be a long-term sustainable goal. It gets you much quicker results, but it's not a long-term sustainable goal. What is our long-term sustainable strategy? We're going to emphasize the love for Hashem, and therefore, since I love Hashem so much, anything that gets in the way of that love of Hashem, I reject it. I am disgusted by it. I am irritated by it. I don't want anything that gets in the way. And that's what the tzaddik has done completely. As he says, Machmas Geidel Avosel Hashem v'Kedushasa, because of the intense love of Hashem and His holiness, Bi'ava Rabba, with overwhelming love. Now these are b'tanugim, with absolute pleasures, which we'll describe in a moment, B'chibi Yasera Hanal, and this extra level of dearness. Now, one of the things that the Alter Rebbe is going to do for us, and he does in general in Chassidus, is we start to give definitive handles or terms to ideas that are essentially amorphous: righteousness, wickedness, holiness. Now, there is a certain human temptation to try and reduce everything to an algorithm. We want everything to be on a chart. And that's useful because it becomes a tool. So we're not just speaking about things, it's kind of like approximately and so on. We want things to have some rigidity. But like following any plan or recipe, there's a rigidity and there's a flexibility. There's an art in the science and a science to the art. Now, one of the areas that the Alter Rebbe is going to nuance for us, not so much in this moment, but he's sort of introducing it to us, is this term that we call love. Now, of course, this is a common phrase not only in our own spoken language, but in Torah as well. And yet, we all are intuitively aware that there are different degrees of love. I love my family, I love my country, I love potato chips, whatever it is. We have all these varied levels that we call love. And the Alter Rebbe, and we find this throughout Tanakh, and so on, in the poetry of davening, these different terms of love that are subtly distinctive from one another. There is the basic level of love. There's Ava Rabba, this level called overwhelming love. Again, try to come up with an English word for it. It's like colors, sun ray, yellow, bright yellow. It's you're trying to put a tag on something that is innately not really designed to be characterized so rigidly, but you do the best you can. So we have a love called, just simply called love, or Abbas Olam, the love born of this world. I look around at the world, I say, wow, this world is so sophisticated. I want to be aligned with the one who created it. Ava Rabba, it's overflowing. I can't describe it. And then the ultimate level, which we are mentioning here as well, is Ava B'Tanugim. Now, Ava B'Tanugim means the love of delights. Now, again, maybe just because I'm a very materialistic person, when I hear love of delights, I'm thinking about, ice cream. I'm thinking about something that, just so delicious. But what it means is, and my favorite phrase for it is alignment. To be in absolute alignment with the infinity of Hashem. So it's not just I love ice cream, because we know we don't love ice cream. We don't say, well, I love my children because they're so much fun, or I love my country because if I love that, then it's always subject to competition. I used to really love chocolate ice cream. Now I love vanilla ice cream. It means it's the desire to be associated therewith. Now, ultimately, love is enough to get me to do the right thing, even if I love that more, meaning I love being connected with Hashem more than I love sitting on the couch. I love sitting on the couch, meaning I desire to sit on the couch. I desire to be in a relationship with Hashem. And one's going to win, the other's going to lose, because either I get off the couch and I do the mitzvah, or I stay on the couch. But the tzaddik has Ava B'Tanugim. That's all he wants. He doesn't love sitting on the couch. That's all he wants. He only sees all of existence as an opportunity to be close with Hashem. He just sees everything in that way. And again, imagine on the other side, it's a lot easier to describe. The guy who all he sees is an opportunity to make a sale at every moment. He meets someone on the bus, he's trying to sell him. He meets somebody in the doctor, he's trying to sell him. He's consumed with it. Well, imagine if we would similarly be consumed with the pursuit of service of Hashem. Imagine if we would continuously be obsessed. That's what it means, Ava B'Tanugim, to be aligned with Hashem. That's the Tzaddik Gomer, because he's completely eradicated and transformed, meaning not just imprisoned, but transformed every other impulse within his existence. So the only thing he's attracted to is his alignment with Hashem. And by doing that, he will essentially crowd out any other desire. So what's the strategy to be disgusted by evil? To talk about how bad it is and how horrible it's going to be if you indulge in that? No, not. What's it going to be? Well, I love Hashem so much that anything that gets in the way is immediately detested. It's because it's in the way of my achieving my objective. Kiheim zelu umazeh. Because one is opposite the other. And this is another core point that the Alter Rebbe hammers home. The two cannot coexist. We cannot be self-indulgent and godly pursuant at the same time. Now, we are complex people, so one minute I feel very aligned with God, the next minute I'm thinking about myself, and we go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. But ultimately, the two cannot coexist simultaneously. I can't be in pursuit of the love of Hashem and donuts at the same time. I mean, think about this yourself. Imagine a person says, I really want to get to know you. I really want to be your friend. And I'm hopeful that you're going to get me a job or you're going to give me something. It's going to detract from the genuine relationship. And as Groucho Marx said, sincerity is the key to life. If you can fake that, you got it made. And it's just going to deplete one from the other. So the Tzaddik Gomer is completely aligned. He has no interest in anything other than his alignment with Hashem. Because you can't really be in pursuit of both at the same time. It's just not going to work. One is going to push aside the other. And here we continue. Because as Shlomo HaMelech says, and this is a verse that the Alter Rebbe quotes often, these two are oppositional to each other. One is opposite the other. They cannot get along. That is the pursuit of self and the pursuit of godliness. Kedichsiv, like it says, Tachlis sini sinesim loivim hayuli chakroni v'dalivavi v'goymer. David HaMelech writes, with absolute hatred did I hate them. They are my enemy. Seek my heart and you will know. That is, the pursuit of self is going to be an absolute antagonistic pursuit of godliness. And again, if you think about this at the personal level, it's understandable. The guy wants to be your friend, he wants to be your friend, he wants to be your friend, but as soon as he realizes you're not buying his product, he doesn't want to be your friend anymore. What happened? I thought you're my friend. It was an article I read years ago, I wish I would have saved it, about a guy, he, quote, accomplished the American dream. He built a very successful business. He sold it at age 55, got a lot of money, he's going to build his dream house. He says, guess what? Nobody returns my calls anymore. What happened? Nobody ever didn't return my call. I thought they loved me. I thought they revered me. I thought they respected me. Whereas my late father-in-law used to say, the biggest trick to being a college professor is to remember that the students don't really think you're the smartest guy in the world. They just want you to think they do. So you'll write them a letter of recommendation to med school, which as soon as they get accepted, they don't call you anymore. What happened? I thought you were seeking my wisdom and guidance. Yeah, now I'm accepted to med school. Have a nice life. So that's not genuine. And here we're shooting for genuine because one is opposite the other. And here's the Alter Rebbe's point. As much as I love Hashem like a pendulum, I am hateful, which is an intellectual thing. I don't like peanuts because they make my child sick. And mius, it's disgusting. I have an innate revulsion for it. Because that emotional disgust for anything that is going to take me away from Hashem. Imagine somebody would come and try to take your children away from you. You'd hate them intellectually and you'd be disgusted by them. Why? Because you love your children and they're trying to take them away from you. They're trying to take them away. So too, this is the Alter Rebbe's strategy. And again, we all recognize it, but I want to underscore how revolutionary it is, that the mechanism to avoiding evil is not by lecturing you about all the terrible things that are going to happen. If, God forbid, someone does evil, it's going to go in the down elevator and how torturous it is, because then you're bargaining. You know, it's like a guy says, I know if I eat this, I'll get heartburn, but it's worth it. You know, it's so delicious, it's worth it. Or we make excuses and tomorrow I'll exercise, whatever it might be. The Alter Rebbe's strategy is if you will love Hashem so much, you'll pull on the door of that restaurant and go, what am I doing here? If I go in here, I'm annoying Hashem. I love my child. When I eat, I like peanuts. I love peanuts, but they make my child sick. I love chametz, but it's Pesach. I love eating, but it's Yom Kippur. So therefore, I completely crowd out that interaction with Klippa because it is the total rejection of godliness. All you got to do is reach that, and after that, it's easy. And that's the level, again, it's an aspiration. We're shooting for it. And once in a while, we'll touch it. Imagine the guy walks in to call Nidre with pizza. What are you doing here? It's, what are you doing? The guy walks into the Seder with cookies. What are you doing? We're trying to be in this moment here. Guy comes to your wedding and says, hey, let's go play Scrabble instead. What are you doing? It's disgusting. What are you doing? But life is not always so obvious. But imagine if we could build up that sense. This is the level of the tzaddik. That's why he's gomer. He's complete. He's completely eradicated and transformed. Not just eradicated, wrong word. He's transformed his animalistic, self-serving impulses to be in the service of God. And that's why toivla, the only thing in his life, is good. All right, we'll stop here.